Hi, everyone. It's Lynn and Mary with Families Engaged. So we haven't talked to you in a while or recorded anything, but we've been trying to take care of things at home and just kind of regroup before we get back in the swing of this whole battle. So we wanted to give you an update on what's happening with the Houston takeover and how we have had a few instances in Texas where the TEA has stepped in and taken over districts, and we can prove that they have not moved the needle at all. In fact, things are worse off with their involvement. So Mary, do you have anything you want to start with before we dive in?
Well, I just want to say that there's a previous ticked recording with Dr. Pat Huff, and it was before the takeover of Houston ISD had actually come to fruition.
Right.
And we were talking about, was there any way to stop it, and what we anticipated, and even what some of the rumors were. And one of the rumors was that Mike Miles would be appointed. And I would say that not that we want to be right, but our right ratio is pretty high when it comes to predicting the corruption and the collusion that's occurring out of the Texas Education Agency. We said in that recording that they would take over Houston ISD and that we thought this would just be the first of many. And we had projected that Fort Worth ISD would be next, but instead it was Austin ISD. And as we go through this recording, we will talk about what's happening in Fort Worth ISD and some of the things that we're seeing there. But I just want to bring everybody up to date that they can go back and listen to that if it's helpful. If there are things that we talk about here that you might not understand or might have questions about. It's a super educating and informative video with Dr. Huff. So I think that, that's where we go. On a trip to speak, you and I drove through Marlin, Texas. And this was 2 years ago, 3 years ago? It's been quite a while. And you had actually driven down and gotten involved and met the superintendent in Marlin, Texas. Oddly enough, I grew up very close to Marlin, Texas, and we know the community personally. So I was super shocked to hear about this, and I'd like to hear what you know about what happened in Marlin, because at that point I was very unaware of what had happened in Marlin.
Okay, well, yes. So Brett Shipp, he was a reporter with Channel 8 in Dallas, and Brett covered the Miles debacle, his regime, Mike Miles' regime, when he was brought in for 3 years in Dallas ISD. He left in a cloud of controversy and amid there were all these scandals, and he had a press conference and left, went to Colorado, and now they're bringing him back to be the appointed superintendent of Houston ISD. But why the Marlin district is an interesting one, something to take note of, is because Mike Morath with the Texas Education Agency, the commissioner, in 2017, so he removed the president of the Marlin ISD school board, or the board of, not school board, but their board of managers. So I wrote this article in 2020, but it was 2017 that this was reported. So I started paying attention. Brett and I actually drove to meet with the former superintendent, Mike Seabolt, and this TEA appointed conservator, Marilyn Martin. And so we met with them, and they were fantastic. I still keep up with Mike Seabolt here. In fact, when we released that Steve Leschlow audio, he texted me about that. I got all kinds of messages from across Texas, people I hadn't talked to in a long time. So anyway, this is important because Marilyn is this fantastic retired educator. And so she would go into districts and with the intent to help them turn it around. She was in there to help them fix some of their processes and their curriculum issues. And she was just an expert in Texas education. And so she would go in there, and whenever they were up to speed and launched and ready to go, she would leave. Well, so she's appointed by TEA. And I guess at some point, she and Seabolt were working together, and they were doing really well. They were actually moving the needle, but then the TEA steps in, removes her, He removed Seabolt. So I wrote this whole article called Something Fishy in Texas, TEA Sharks, and the Marlin City Council, because it was all kind of tied to sort of like what Morath tried to do with the mayoral takeover of Dallas ISD, which failed, but they seem to think that these people who can't even solve homelessness or crime or poverty or the issues that happen in a city, that somehow they're going to be able to miraculously run a school district and turn it around and everything's going to be great. It's failed in other states. It's failed in other cities. And this is just a classic example of TEA, the heavy hand of TEA stepping in, removing local, not just they're overstepping, not just that. Well, you and I know that education is supposed to be local. It's supposed to be, the decisions are supposed to be made locally, but also the democratic process. These are elected, people are elected to represent us. So you and I know that we've got all kinds of issues with our elected trustees, but we have a grievance process and we have due process. We have certain steps that we can take. And most people don't even know their rights under the law to even know how to advocate for them. I know I was guilty of that. I would go before the school board and I would complain about this and that, but I did not file a grievance. That was my mistake. And I learned that from you, and you're doing that. And we are doing that now with Families Engaged and training people how to do this. So long story short, this, so we see in the paper, or in an article just a few weeks ago, that the Marlin School District
canceled graduation.
There's no graduation because they don't have enough students who are actually graduating. I mean, how pathetic is that? So that is proof. Yes.
However, I was talking to some state board of education members, and as a matter of fact, one who Marlin is their territory. I don't understand why they would cancel a graduation. I don't care if it's one person. The 5 that are successful deserve to be recognized. But we are in a culture now that success is covered up because of how it makes other people feel. And I'm curious whose decision it was to cancel this. We may have to do a public information request on why Marlin High School canceled their graduation, because they only have 5 seniors. 5 seniors deserve a graduation.
5 of the schools, 33 seniors had met the requirements. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even do a graduation during 2020. We just did a drive-through nonsense thing. But yeah, they should get something.
Yeah, but to your point, this is how many years later after TEA has stepped in, and this is the return on TEA's takeover. As we would say, this is the fruit. No, there is no fruit. But what did it cost the city? What did it do to the city? I mean, there's so many things. What happened to the teachers? And this is a very, very small school district.
Very small and very the economically disadvantaged. It says 98.7% of the school students come from economically disadvantaged background. Total of 229 students were enrolled at the school. So yeah, it's a struggling district, and but they didn't give Seabolt or Martin a chance to turn that district around. They came in, but the goal of the TEA is to privatize. They want to bring in charters that don't have locally elected boards so they can do this. So this is kind of a microcosm of what Morath is doing at TEA. So I thought that was something that would be important for for people to understand as we watch what's happening in Houston. Now, so about Houston, are we done with Marlin? Do you have anything else you want to say about
absolutely. I just think that that's something, even though it's small, a small school district, that it is a real insight. We see so many pilot programs that this Texas Education Agency under Morath have done, whether it's for English language arts. They have all of these examples, and they all point to failure, yet somehow they get sold as success. And, our elected officials let him continue, and the governor lets him continue with this fake success.
Yeah, it's all manufactured. In fact, Morath's success has been manufactured. And then what I've noticed is the lazy press, they do a cut and paste thing. They don't check or verify themselves. Oh, well, he sold his company, or, oh, the success in Dallas, the Dallas Miracle. They don't do their own fact checking, because if it's in print from the Dallas Morning News or Houston Chronicle or whatever the outlet, they just cut and paste that and use that as their reference or their source, but they don't do the verification themselves. Also, when you look at the success of Mike Miles, so this is something I'm going to share screen on that, because I've got several things I want to address on that, because you and I are attending this protest. And so first of all, start with that. And this is on Thursday. So today is Tuesday. The protest is on Thursday, June 8th. So we'll get this video out and share it so people can be ready to go for that. So let me, I'm going to share the screen real quick.
So while you're sharing the screen, I'm super, as a matter of fact, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was reading emails about who all was going to be a part of the appointment by the Texas Education Agency and the great plan to overtake the constitutional republic in Houston ISD to save these children. And it's disgusting. I mean, it is literally disgusting. I think I sent an email to one of you and said, I'm just going back to sleep today. This is not worth it. They're destroying children. And
I think it's
well, they're taking the constitutional republic with it as well.
Right. I think there's this perception that the public schools are filled with just liberal families and liberal people's children. And that's just not true. Across Texas, there's a huge percentage of our children whose families are considered conservative. And so but now in the urban areas, that may not be true. Obviously, the majority of the students come from families who might vote Democrat. But what I think is important about this Houston, why I want to participate in this, and I know you do too, is because they are removing the elected bodies. You and I have seen how they're trying to do this. They're trying to limit the state board of education, which is an elected body. Morath is trying to circumvent that elected body. There's 15 of them across the state. And he wants to shift the power away from the state board to himself. And there are legislators who are joining him in that plan. But I bring that up because with this Houston takeover, if you look at the bottom of this list, it looks like it's a bunch of radical leftist organizations who are supporting who are in protest and in opposition to this takeover. Well, that is true. I mean, no question. But like the NAACP and Black Voters Matter and Community Voices, I can't read the other ones. There's ACLU. Like, you and I would not be in agreement with a lot of the things that these organizations stand for.
No.
But we are in agreement. The fact that the democratically elected board, there's nothing conservative about having appointed people to something that is supposed to be locally decided. They're supposed to be locally elected boards to manage our schools. And this is a huge fiduciary responsibility. And arguably, Houston trustees have failed at managing that. But what they're bringing in with Morath is not going to be any better, because you look at the history of Mike Miles and the cabinet that he has put together, which I'll go into that in a minute. There is a long history of failure, of controversy. Miles was actually brought to Dallas by this recruiting company, and he was mentored under Barbara Byrd Bennett, who went to federal prison. So this is a very corrupt network and system of people. It's an ecosystem. And okay, so this is happening on Thursday. So I'm hoping that we can get more conservative organizations to join in this. So it's not just and I don't think it will be there, but at least the ones who put their names on it are, this is not bipartisan in the opposition to it on this. But they say protect democracy. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic.
Thank you.
And so when they say protect democracy, we can protect the democratic process, which is you and I would be for, but we are not a democracy. That actually results in mob rule, which of course we do not want.
well,
But
and I
we
would
do
like
not
to
want
say,
school closures.
yeah, I totally appreciate that you called that out because I was going to. But I think what that goes to, that just points out that we are generations behind from teaching correctly how our government should operate and what our government is and what
Right.
has set us apart. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic, and we do have representation. And that is what is at stake here, is that representative form of government. And more in everything we do, you see at the local level, and you see at the top the diminishment of that representative form of government, whether it's done by large donors controlling how they vote, such as Dick Weekly, or
Yeah.
whether it's the governor appointing all these czars over these committees. And these agencies, for the most part, any agency that the state of Texas runs that has anything to do with children fails. It is a huge failure.
Right.
CPS is a failure, and the Texas Education Agency is a failure. So I appreciate very much, because we need to make sure that we educate people over and over and over again to the correct terminology.
Well, I was trying to tell with this preserve wraparound services. So people have to understand that wraparound services aren't going to leave in this plan. I think that that's a false fear. And wraparound services is not the role of the government schools. That's not their role. Now they're already doing that, and they will continue to do that. But that's actually not the point of having neighborhood schools and having free public schools constitutionally. That is supposed to provide a general diffusion of knowledge. Wraparound services is not part of that. Now they've added that over the years, and through federal intrusion, which I would argue there's no constitutional justification for the Department of Education having any role, much less TEA. You know, I don't even believe there should be TEA authority over our schools. I believe that is unconstitutional.
I believe
they've
that
added
also.
that over the years. So
I
it's supposed to be
agree
local.
with this, the preserve wraparound services. I mean, again, I don't want to argue with their flyer to get people coming. At the end of the day, we need as many people to show up, but the wraparound services are a distraction from the education. And we need to, again, to help educate everyone what these wraparound services ultimately do to their parental authority. That it's surrendering their parental authority to let the government provide those, and that they must hold fast to those. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to educate them on that. So let's look at who is going to run the Texas Education Agency version of Houston ISD.
Oh, and I just want to point out one more thing. Fight the secret plans to harm our children. That actually is true. And it is a hostile takeover of HISD. So those things are absolutely true. And these are secret plans. They are funded by billionaires. This is not going to move the needle for kids. It's actually going to result in worse outcomes for children. But of course, you know, people are willing to roll the dice because the perception of the public schools is so bad that they're thinking, oh no, this will be a good thing. Okay, I'm going to pull up a couple of other
so I want to, while you're pulling up the other photos, so one of the people that we've learned that's behind the scenes and that approves so much of what's happening in Houston, as well as what the TEA has done, is Dick Weekly. In this past session, he spent $7 million donating to elected officials. His home he resides in and operates a business and a political action committee out of the heart of Houston ISD. If he took that $7 million and had invested it into the failed schools of Houston ISD, they would not be failing. If he would have gotten with them and brought in special services for special ed and reading academies and all of these other things, if that money would have been concentrated in that area, and if they would have been taught how to create the safety net in that lower socioeconomic, this would not be happening. He could have been a part of preserving the constitutional republic instead of diminishing it, and instead he worked to diminish it.
So, sorry, I was trying to share the screen. I lost the picture that I pulled up. Okay, Why does it keep doing that?
Okay, so where is
or what do you
Kristen
see?
Hall?
Okay.
I just see the two of us.
Okay. Yeah, I need to move this over. Hold on. I don't have her on here, but you can talk about her. But what I was going to do is provide the list of the new his new cabinet for Miles. Okay. All right.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I'm astonished that Miles was who they chose over and over and over again. People who are not qualified and who have failed are used to run our Texas education institutes over and over and over again. And Fort Worth ISD is a very good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there we have Christine Anderson stating.
No, that's just somebody posted. I don't know who that is. I just used the screenshot because somebody sent it to me.
Okay, yeah. I can't read it.
Don't worry about it. I'll do it. So Miles has brought in this cabinet, and what's being voted on Thursday when we're going, but right before the protest that happens before the school board meeting, which is a public meeting, that they've got his contract and they have all these appointed board trustees that are coming, that TEA has appointed, but then Miles has announced his cabinet, even though he has not been voted in yet. There's this 21-day period that we have a small window to expose him for his failures and for his lack of experience, and the lack of credibility to even be in this role. Okay, so we've got his 3 division superintendents who will be responsible for overseeing subsets of the district. One is a former superintendent of Midland and Cedar Hill ISD. Now that is someone that I'm familiar with because I wrote a couple of articles about him. His name is Orlando Riddick. He was the superintendent. Well, he came from Cedar Hill, but then went to Midland ISD, and he was selected by Todd Williams of the Commit Partnership and by Educate Texas. And I found an article saying that they recommended him. And so they've been kind of controlling Midland behind the scenes, which is why I published those articles on LinkedIn. So Orlando Riddick was such a failure. He couldn't get the bond passed. And that's the best way to get rid of a superintendent. If people don't have confidence in the super, then they are kicked to the curb. I think it was 18 schools declined in performance while he was there. So they brought in a Mike Miles charter in Midland. So Mike Miles has ties to Midland. This is a network. And yes, and so this is a kind of a blueprint that they're doing in other ISDs. So it's not just Dallas ISD. Miles has failed upwards. And even though he runs this charter out of Colorado, they've been bringing him in, treating him as though he's this turnaround king. Okay, Jim Terry was fired by, I want to say Hinojosa fired him. But anyway, he served as CFO under Miles. And I want to say when Mike Hinojosa replaced Miles, what's interesting in Dallas is both Mike Hinojosa, we call him the 3 blind Mikes, because you got Mike Morath, Mike Hinojosa, and then Mike Miles. So they were all there, and Mike Morath was on the DISD school board when Miles was hired. And so Mike Morath voted on him. So there's all these conflicts in these previous relationships. Jim Terry also served as CFO under Miles' Third Future Schools, and Dallas ISD was named, and Dallas ISD, and he was named CFO of Houston ISD. Miles selected Kristen Dobson-Hull, a curriculum developer at TEA, to be the chief academic officer. And you and I ran into her, and it was a pathetic display of how little she knows. I mean, we would have run circles around her had they let us at the Senate address her, but they didn't. So they brought her up there because, we've got someone from the TEA, so let's talk about this Amplify curriculum. Well, she didn't know she didn't know much. And she also admitted they rebranded Amplify, which is a whole other show. We've done multiple shows on.
Now, Lynn, I wonder, is it that she didn't know much or she was afraid to speak?
Yeah, we did catch her in a lie, and she was afraid to speak. And we saw her afterwards, and she was being consoled by Monica Martinez. I took pictures of that. And, and sometimes I feel bad because I'm thinking, these are
Real people.
These are real people, and she has a family, and we know one of our friends was talking to her like, how can you do this? You have young children, and do you know what you're doing? And the thing is like, I'm not going to go after her personally, but professionally, she's harming children. And her role at TEA, her background, and this is a recurring thread that I've seen, is that these people that are being appointed by Miles have a background in social impact, which means they track through massive data mining and tracking and sorting and following these children and accessing them from, womb to tomb. They all have this kind of social impact and social innovation in their background, which is a human capital kind of investment scheme. That's why some of these billionaires are tapping into this, and they need the technology because they can't do it in an organic way and still gather all that data. They have to do it through digital. Yes.
So personally, I look at this and I've said over and over and over again that, our children are a commodity for the state and for the technology sector, that they are just, it's no longer about education. They're just a commodity. They're a means to an end for moving to this globalization and the ESG. And Kristen Hull was testifying for 1605, Senate Bill 2565 and House Bill 1605, which is what we refer to as the Amplify Bill. And you mentioned it earlier. It's going to be rebranded as Boost. But my big question here is, so she is their expert on this. And she was supposed to be a part of the team that helped change the content of the standards of Amplify. And the whole purpose of Amplify is to embed all of the SEL, embed the CRT, embed all of these mental health surveys, embed everything so that even the teachers cannot really identify where it is, and that it's embedded and that the parents aren't going to recognize it, but yet they are asking the questions throughout that give them the data that they need, and they're completely online. They're on screens and headsets.
And we will see more of that with Miles, for sure.
And I am super thinking, and again, I said our right ratio is pretty good, is that this Houston takeover, and as you mentioned earlier, it's a highly populated, low socioeconomic. The percentage,
because that's a predatory. They're preying upon what they know. These are impoverished communities. These people they're all poverty pimps. And you look at and this is what really irritates me. Okay, and one thing. What I was going to say is
she's going there to do this, and they're going to pilot this. And again, they're going to control the outcome because they control the input. Whoever controls the input, whoever controls the testing questions, controls the outcome. So he's going to be able, for the first time at Marlin, he didn't have this. He's going to be able to say, see, look what we did. However, there'll be no improvement. There will be no improvement. There will be even less. And you will have children who have been mentally altered. And I believe that's why Kristen was picked for that. Plus, she probably was not too welcome at TEA anymore after her performance, but we don't know that. So I'll just say.
Okay. Well, so what I was going to say is that both Miles, they call this the Dallas Miracle, and whether Mike Miles or Mike Hinojosa was in the role, they still claim that they both were successful, but we know the truth is they were both failures. They can't both be successful. That both cannot be true, but both can be true that they were both failures, because Mike Hinojosa 1.0 was there from 2005 to whenever Miles got there. So, and Miles was like 2012 to 2015, I believe, those 3 years. So Mike Miles was brought in to replace Hinojosa, who had a fiscal disaster, and so he fled. So, but then Michael Hinojosa was brought back to Dallas ISD because of Mike Miles' disaster. So both were actually failures, but both cannot be successful at the same time. And we know that Houston, by all accounts, is performing better than Dallas ISD, but yet
Right.
Houston is the one being taken over, and they keep claiming that Dallas has this miracle. Okay, so I want to go in some of the other people. Sandy Massey was a principal at Thomas Jefferson High School in Dallas ISD. So you'll see this, these people are scratching each other's backs, lining up jobs for them, and then they follow each other where they go. They're all like kind of education nomads, or like traveling gypsies. So Sandy Massey, so she then went to Colorado, and she signed the Colorado leases for these charter schools. And remember, this is a real estate. These charter school deals are real estate deals. That's why real estate billionaires are involved in this, because they want to collapse the traditional public schools. They want to bring in more charters. They want to get the land. These are land grabs. They're also money grabs. And then you've got, okay, Carrie Briggs. This is where serendipity.
This is bad. This is so bad. Carrie Briggs. We will never get rid of the Bushes. Will we ever get rid of the Bushes? No.
And this is what really pisses me off. Okay, so I'm at a party, and the party was like a book club for this, some sort of policy institute or something that my friend invited me to. So I'm standing there at the little hors d'oeuvre table, and, oh, hi, what do you do? That kind of thing. And she's, thinking I'm just some, housewife, but she starts telling me about her education reform and what she does. And I'm like, I happen to be, education researcher, activist. Yeah, I know all this stuff that you're talking about. I think she was a bit, taken aback. Yeah. But she spills the beans to me that this is all still kind of pandemic. I want to say it was like maybe late 2022, early 2021, somewhere around there. It was.
I remember you telling me about this.
Yeah. And so she tells me that the TEA is just drowning in ESSER and federal funds and contracts galore, just handing out these contracts like candy. And come to find out, I do a little research on her, come to find out she's a partner with Cicero Group. So my question is, they said that she is going to be the chief of staff of Mike Miles. That is a huge political position. And then you see that she's been at the Department of Education. She's worked with George Bush Institute. It says the 43rd President's Assistant Secretary for Elementary and Secondary Education. Like, she's a deep, deep, deep reformer. She doesn't have children of her own, because I kept asking, I was like, I was kind of probing a little bit. I'm thinking, do you know what you're implementing? Like, if you have, and there are plenty of people who don't have children who are involved in education.
Right.
And great activists, and I have several who I call on and for information. They're fantastic. They take it very personally what happens to these children, but this is all in her ivory tower that she's implementing policy. She's on the dark side of things. She is not on the right side of things. And the fact that they selected her, I've been following her, and all these people that I go onto LinkedIn and I'm like, who are these people? I go down the rabbit hole. They're all connected to her, because I've connected with her on LinkedIn.
Wow.
We're LinkedIn, connected. And so if you look at her, also her work at Cicero Group, Cicero is a social impact firm. Katamba, who was hired by Mike Miles as a consultant. Katamba, we found in Midland, they're a social impact firm. This is the part that I can't get the press to talk about, because they don't understand what it is. Social impact investing is where investors invest in, you have these global impact investors or in local, and they invest in these experiments on children, and then they get a return on the end. You can find Goldman Sachs has done this. This is why Todd Williams of the Commit Partnership is so engaged in the education space, because they have to collect massive amounts of data, and it's a very long game. You can't do this overnight. And a lot of the people like John Arnold, who, there are people who've traded on energy futures. You've got real estate developers, all these people who are engaged. They know that this will have a massive payout on the end. It's a very patient endeavor. It's a long game, but much like they shorted the market on housing, they can short the lives of children. They can actually track, and then you get a return on the end, and they have to do it through the technology. So you have so many different people involved in this. If you look at the coalition, which I'll quit talking, and I want to share some of these other screenshots. Well, and I wanted to go over his cabinet.
Yeah, going over his head, but I think what people just totally don't realize is that this is a prostitution of sorts. I mean, and
Mhm.
there is even a sexual component to all of it because of what they do with it, but I'm not using the word prostitution in that manner. They are selling the children. They're selling any future freedom of the children because they are creating a workforce supply chain.
Yeah,
And
it's a
they will,
pipeline, and
it
they
is a
use the
pipeline.
children. Yes, in the public schools is a pipeline for low wage
Yeah.
workers.
Yeah.
It's also a mass immigration
Yep.
vehicle, and then they get the butts in the seats funding. They get the data that they can collect on the students, more money because of poverty, and if they're at-risk children. So there's like layers and layers of graft, and those bottom
So,
feeders who come around and do the wraparound services,
but
they also.
Lynn, here's the thing, is that the
Mhm.
average person who's at home that doesn't have children
Mhm.
in the system, they shrug their shoulders and don't get engaged in this. Now, my child is grown and yours are you have a one or
Mhm.
two left in college, just barely. And here's the point. You should be livid because
Mm.
it is the taxpayers who are funding the front side on their gain on the back side.
Yes,
You
because
are
these
fun.
appointed people who are all
Yes,
shills and yes
yes,
men, those are still going to set the property tax rate. The people are still going to be paying for these schools, whether they have their kids in them or not.
that's
And
right.
this is a huge it's theft. It's theft.
It
Okay, I
is
want to go
theft.
over some of Miles' failures because this is important. During his, they listed this as all the things that he's done that it makes him
Uh-huh.
so successful. It's all been. They said he oversaw this TEI merit pay, and I have a lot of I fight with the conservatives on this issue because they're like, oh, merit pay, we shouldn't. We need to have these teachers have to be like make it more competitive, and they need to prove that they're through merit pay
No,
that
you
they
can't
have
do
to
that.
work. No, what happens is it brings what it does is it creates competition. It nearly crushed Microsoft. You can't. This is a highly collaborative craft industry, whatever you want to call it, with teaching. You don't want teachers pitted against each other competing. And we found that in Dallas it's like some of our friends like you and Blackman who tried to go to Dallas to get this TEI, they left because it's all spin saying that these people are going to make six
Well,
figures. They have
I
like
mean,
six
let's
people
just
making 90 something thousand.
then you have the teachers fighting over what kid they're going to have in their class because the teachers know after
Mhm.
kindergarten, they know who the smart kids are and they want the smart kids in their class. And if they're in tight, because it's just as greasy as some of the other industries. If you're friends with the superintendent or friends with the principal, then your
Right.
class is going to be a higher performing class. And so
Right.
you're going to move up that pay scale. I'm totally opposed
Yeah.
to it because it
And it's all
says,
about test scores anyway. So I
yeah,
won't belabor that. We're going to move through this. Okay. So he
okay,
also oversaw the establishment of the Accelerating Campus Excellence Initiative. All of these things came from the Commit Partnership. These were reforms that Commit and Mike Morath and Todd Williams were championing. So he's trying to roll these things out now. They're trying to do it not only statewide, but they'll try and scale it nationwide. But ACE campuses, we did it in Richardson ISD, and it's a failed model because it's not sustainable. What they do is they try and bring their brightest and their best to these low performing campuses and where they have the most at-risk kids. They pay them a stipend and give the teachers an incentive to be there, and they put all these supports around it. Well, I'm not against bringing supports around these low performing and high poverty schools. What they're promoting, it disrupts your campuses where the teachers leave, and then it doesn't solve the problem because it's only a 3-year program. And Mike Miles, while he was at DISD, he really, this is just spin, and we've got the data to show that these were failures, and a lot of these campuses were closed. So that's one way of solving a problem, is just shutting a campus down, which of course
yeah,
is
yeah.
a fake solution. But anyway, he resigned in a cloud of controversy. It says the reason he resigned was citing a desire to rejoin his family in Colorado, and that is just false. He left because he had to, and he resigned because the media at the time was actually there were people reporting on
Exposing.
his failures, but those people are gone now, and so Dallas media is now run by have I paused the screen the whole time? Can you see this that I'm doing? Sorry.
Yeah.
I think can you see the TEI thing? Can you see the,
Mm,
You
No.
only see me? Yeah.
No, I see
somehow.
you, and I see the Miles selected Carrie Briggs.
Huh. Oh, okay. It said it was paused, but I don't know why it says that.
I hope you didn't pause the recording. So
No, I
want to
didn't
go back
pause the
and
recording.
I want to go back and talk real quick about what some information. If you're done with Miles, I want to talk about where we are in Houston. So that Miles has already announced in Houston that all of the teachers are going to have to reapply for their jobs.
Oh, that
And
just makes me sick.
That is what is going on right now in Fort Worth ISD. And ironically, the superintendent in Fort Worth ISD came from Midland, and she's already fired over 150 people, and she's not completed her first year there. And she's bringing in her staff, just like Miles. She's bringing in her staff from Midland, and Midland was no better off. Midland was so excited that she left, and she was only there a year. So you have Midland, a mess that's about to be taken over. And in our last video, I said Fort Worth was going to be the next one to be taken over. Let me tell you something. PEA doesn't have to take Fort Worth over because they have their operative in there with Angelica. I mean, they with
I mean, it's
Ramsey in there. Yeah.
Angelica,
whatever her name is, Ramsey. They have Dr. Ramsey in there from Midland, and she has fired all these people, and then she's trying to get a law passed that they don't have to live in the district to work there. And she's going to let people that she had in Midland work remotely, because the cost of living in Fort Worth is more than the cost of living in Midland, ironically. But she's going to let them, we hear she's going to let them work remotely. And again, we could go on for an hour. If we have not, we may have gotten close to that. But I think that people have to be aware that the Big Brother, the TEA, is way more involved in all of these local issues than what you realize, through the law firms that local school boards unknowingly affiliate with to hire and help them find do superintendent searches. The TEA communicates with these law firms about who they want to go where. And as we've trained on Delphi, they Delphi in this particular superintendent searches all the time. They use Delphi a whole lot.
Yeah.
And
that means they just have a preordained outcome established.
Yeah, preordained outcome. And again, that is why we have her in Fort Worth. And you have to be, local school boards have to really, really, really listen to the things that the parents who know what is the Moms Bureau of Investigation need to listen to the moms. Or the families, the people who are doing the research, that are seeing the truth and the reality of all of this. We're given truth and reality over and over and over again. And so TEA is not even having to take over Fort Worth. We think that they ultimately will, but they don't have to. They have complete control with Dr. Ramsey there.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Well, okay. And so I think we can probably end on that note. Again, we want people to show up at the protest. Anybody in and around Houston, or anybody interested in driving there, because and you know what, you can also sign up to speak at the board meeting, which I'll try and include that. Yeah, I gotta sign us up. I was gonna include that in there's a way to sign up online, so I gotta remember to do that.
Well, and also I call to the governor's office that you are sick and tired of the Texas government undermining the representative form of government, the representative constitutional republic, because that is what's at the root of so many of the things that we saw during this last session, let alone what we saw happening out in the school districts with TEAs taking over. If we don't fight to keep the constitutional republic, it'll be gone. We'll never get it back. And that is I mean, that is the single thing that has set America apart. We must fight. Texas is the largest education system in the union. We must fight to hold on to that.
Well, and that's why they want to take Texas, and there is it's very apparent that what they're doing here, they do want to scale it nationwide, studying the reforms that have come out of Dallas and the manufactured success of those. They want that to go straight to the Department of Education, including the blockchain wallets for students and tracking these kids on this pre-K to gray, womb to tomb, cradle to career model. So this agenda is on a massive scale. But I want to reiterate, I don't want this to be about partisan stuff. And the thing that I mentioned earlier on the protest is that it does appear, and because it turns people off, because people like to stay in their camps, whether it's right or left, the polarization.
No,
People
it's
like to,
not.
oh, I'm here, I'm there, that's them, that's, us against them. No, this actually is something that affects all of Texas, not just the Houston ISD residents. One thing I was going to say is a solution that you and I have kind of talked about is that I think that it's important, if parents have the means, to pull their kids out and sell your house in Houston if this goes through, because even though somebody else will buy that house, the idea is to starve the beast. So we don't want the butts in the seat funding to go to the district if it's taken over by Miles. We don't want people to pay property taxes in Houston. And I mean, I'm serious about this, because this is what they're doing. People have to send a very clear message. They do not support this behavior. And they're struggling in my district with a budget shortfall of I don't know, it was like 70 million or something. I don't know what it is now, but all these districts are struggling. They're losing students because they're pissing off the parents and they're not listening. And so this is partly how we got in this mess, is because parents didn't say, no, you can't take over my school district. They should have done this years ago. I knew about this years ago, the takeover. This has been tied up in the courts. Where are the parents? Why are they not willing to fight to preserve their schools and their neighborhood schools and get these reformers out of there? Because they're distracted.
I think, again, the parents don't know, and that's why we have to continue to do what we're doing. The parents are learning more and waking up, and it's a complex situation. It is so complex. It is hard to understand.
Yeah.
The other option that I would say is, if you cannot do that, get a large number of people to opt your child out of being educated on any technology,
any device. That is a wrench. That is a way to make Swiss cheese.
Yes, that's another way of making Swiss cheese. And the other thing is, it saves them from collecting the data, and it keeps them from being able to use your child as a part of the social impact and to make money off of them. It prevents them from using your child as a commodity. It also prevents them from having the data on your child. And the other great secret to all of that is the likelihood that your child will learn reading, writing, and math has gone up exponentially, because the success, the data shows that 33% improvement in the acumen of reading, writing, and math when it is not done on a device. So if you insist on good teacher, paper and pencil for your child, and you have every right to do that, then you will also be having an impact on what they're trying to do in every school district. So thanks for being a part. Join us. We hope to see some people come up to us that we don't know Thursday and say, hey, Mary, hey, Lynn, we're with you guys in this.
Yeah. We don't have to agree politically to agree on this. We can agree on this, that this is our constitutional right. The Article 7 of the Constitution is to make provision for public free education, a general diffusion of knowledge, and they're going to remove that right if they succeed in this full scale privatization takeover of Houston ISD. It's wholesale privatization of their schools.
It's interesting. I love that you say that, because several elected officials have gotten super angry with me because I said this is not right left. I am not gonna. I am going to work with Democrats when they show that they are concerned and interested in
That's right.
children being educated and protected. That we are not, this is not about promoting a Republican Party or a Democrat Party. This is about protecting children, educating children, and making sure that the people who we do elect understand the unspoken consequences of what they are doing. And they do know, and they are continuing to do it. So please join the force and start holding them accountable. We've got to change what our representation looks like.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. Bye, y'all.